Hi there, it's Polly here. Haha. With my gaming friend, Miss Schnoots. And today we're assisted by Fancy Frog. He's fancy because he's sparkly. Yay! But anyway, Rabbit. Yeah. So I have a terrible addiction to space combat games. And the 90s. The 90s were like a golden period for cool fantasy and sci-fi board games. Now, the two really cool kind of space fighter games that came out sort of late 90s there was the Renegade Legion Interceptor, which I adore, and that's my favorite. But the other cool one was Silent Death. Now, Silent Death, it brought things to the table. You know, it was slightly different to Interceptor. I've done a review of Interceptor and I love it. Silent Death was way more regular science fiction, but very, very playable. So, what does it bring to the table? Well, one thing, it's still going. It is still out there. You will find it on drive-thru, and there was a version called the New Millennium. They have revised the rules and tightened things up, and so there's still editions of this out there. This is still a living game. It's a living game because it's outrageously good fun and it's easy to play. So this is played on a hex star map, and it is designed for fighter and kind of patrol boat level combat. So it's not for big capital ships, it's for the little guys. It doesn't tie you down with like vector movement and everything, but it gives you a good maneuver game. So what you've got is ships, and the ships have a display. And what you do is you generate crew. So you generate pilots and gunners and sometimes engineers. They get skills and sometimes they get little quirks and so on. And the ships themselves are essentially characters in their own right. There is a design system in the game that lets you design fighters and so on of different types, patrol boats, etc. It's a good design system. As part of that design system, you can design strengths and quirks and faults into your design. So that will get you, so if you deliberately put some strange little quirky faults in the thing, it will get you some extra spaces and so on in your design. Well, you guys really stripped out the protection on the wiring here in order to shove a bigger set of engines in it. But these are choices that you make at the design stage. What it brings to the table, I think, is a speed of play, which is what Interceptor did not have. So you can have more ships on the table with this, so you get kind of more kind of group squadron sort of tactics. So you can play this easily with a dozen ships, under control of one player, as opposed to single dogfights. You can do single dogfights, but this is a simpler system. So you have a speed for your ship, and you can move anything from 0 to that speed in the hexes. It costs you speed points to turn a hex face. If you want to turn more than one hex face, then you're doing a tight turn, and the cost to do the tight turn is a random dice roll, and that random dice roll is smaller or larger depending on your pilot skill. But if the random dice roll is more than the amount of movement points you've got left, then your turn ends and you don't make the turn. So if you're trying to do anything kind of really fling that thing around the sky is tricky, do it at the start of your movement, not kind of niggling at the end. So strangely enough, that very simple rule puts some nuance into planning your move, like, I'll roll this, and because obviously what you're trying to do is get onto people's tail, as close as possible. Your guns and various other weapon systems, of course, have firing arcs, which are designed into the vehicles when you actually create them. Gunners and pilots, you can each fire once a turn, and the rules are split up so that At the start of a turn, you basically will be firing ordnance. So they have missiles and they have torpedoes. Missiles are small things that have explosive heads that move very, very fast. Torpedoes are slower moving things that pack like a seriously massive warhead in them. The missiles will just be done as a dice roll, but because it's a physical thing that's traveling to the target, your opponent, for one thing, gets a chance to jam them, or if he's got point defense, to gun them down. And he can try and jink and throw them off. He can expend movement points to try and make himself harder to hit. But it comes down to, effectively, you're doing a dice roll to hit. They're fired in volleys. They're a bit anime on this. You fire like bunches of 5 missiles at people. So you can fire like 5 or 10 missiles in a single blast at people, and so you're carrying packs of these things. Torpedoes are honking great big things, and they're fired off as individual things, and they will actually move on the board during the movement phase. You nominate a target, and they will move directly towards that guy using the simplest route to get to them, but they don't have to roll for tight turns and so on. They just have a set turn cost. And there are different types of warheads, different types of torpedoes. There are fast-moving ones that have lighter warheads, and there are slower-moving ones that have truly massive warheads. Your choice, which type of version of torpedo you want. If you're going to attack like freighters and slow-moving things, you probably want the slow-moving big warhead ones, because these things aren't going to be able to jink out of the way, and they're not going to. You're going to need the damage to bring them down. The fighters, maybe you want a fast-moving, smaller warhead one, because it's still going to do a ton of damage when it hits, but it'll go faster and be way easier to get into his hex and blow him up. So, ordnance fires, and then your ships move, and you take turns moving your vessels around, and then you fire your guns. And there's a plethora of different guns. And again, they all come in design. They've all got different sizes and so on that you're trying to put into the design. But effectively, they sort of boil down into some things are... Some guns can be so heavy that you cannot fire them at small vehicles that still have a certain amount of movement points, because they say the target's jinking around too much. This is too big a gun to track those. So, okay. You can put guns that are too big to be that useful in a fighter combat, unless you whittle the other guy's maneuver down. There are some that are accurate but don't do that much damage. There are some that do a ton of damage that aren't that accurate. There are some that do a ton of damage that are relatively short ranged, etc. You make your choices. There are changes to your chance of firing. Your chance of hitting, depending on the target aspect. So obviously it's better to be on someone's tail than firing at someone that's coming towards you at an angle. You are rolling dice to hit, and those dice are based on the gunnery skill of the character that is firing them. And you are effectively rolling straight up dice to hit. Some weapons have more or less range of dice, 2d6, 2d8, and so on. Effectively, they're saying the faster the weapon fires, the more, the better the dice. So you have a better chance of hitting with kind of rapid-fire lasers than you do with something that's like flinging a mass driver that's flinging, 1 or 2 big explosive shells. There's an interesting damage system. So the weapons are all keyed so that you're just doing like the one roll to hit. You're not then rolling to damage. And some of them will say the damage is L for low, and that means the damage is equal to the lowest of the dice you rolled on your roll to hit. It's always 2 dice of some sort to hit. Others will say H, it is the highest of those 2 rolls. Some might be like the sum of those dice. And in some cases, if there are doubles, then you keep the doubles and you roll again. So there are different kind of coded weapons that do different sorts of damage. And the vehicles have an armor that subtracts from the incoming damage, and anything that gets past that goes onto the damage track. And this is kind of what brings some of the uniqueness into the game. Every single vehicle has a damage track and you will mark off boxes from left to right as you hit, and these boxes are coded for what they are, what systems they are damaging. And those codes can be things like whittling down the maneuver of the ship so it becomes slower and more unwieldy as it takes damage. It can be blowing up weapons. It can be destroying scanners and so on. There are also set boxes that it goes to which tells you to roll on a critical hit chart. The critical hit charts are unique for each vehicle. There is essentially a core one, but when you design a vehicle, if you design it, you also put mods into that vehicle's critical hit chart. So in many ways, each critical hit chart is unique, but those critical hits can include things like damaging crew, killing crew, causing major flame outs, all kinds of things, or they can be a nothing. There are also some design elements that you put in that protect against critical hits. So if you've paid for the weight and the cost to provide pilot armor, then if you roll the pilot kill, the first pilot kill that you roll, it's just no. That was a good investment. So yeah, you can do those sorts of things. You can also like armor some of the gun systems and so on in the same way. So there are things that negate some of those rolls, which are but it's that simplicity of we do damage and we cross all these boxes. When it gets to the last one, it goes foom. But some of the critical hits you can also go foom. You can blow up the ship. So it's not just a straight grind down. You can eject from a ship that blows up. There's little pilot ejection things. Whee! And there are rules for increasing pilot skills and more quirks and traits and things as they get experience through the game, which they get through engaging in scenarios and blowing stuff up. So there is a considerable universe that goes with this, with history and intriguing bad guys, and the New Millennium is a kind of a change from the original setting. It's set 1,000 years later. So, they tried doing a restart on their universe for some strange reason. And you can take it or leave it. If you don't want to use that universe, it's still just kind of a cool game of space fighter combat. So the design system, what they do is that there are different frames that you pick. And you say, right, I'm going for a one-man light fighter. I'm going from a one-man kind of... There's usually a light, medium, and heavy fighter. Let's say one-man, two-man, three-man crew. And then they have small patrol vehicle, larger patrol vehicles, etc. These are the frames. These give you a certain number of slots, which is what you can put equipment into. They've got a base cost, they've got a base mass, and so on. And so what you're doing is you've got the base performance for that vehicle, and then you can use those slots to put in what you want from your vehicle. So that can be used for weapons, that can be used for up-armoring it, up-engineing it, and putting in special equipment and putting in other little vehicle quirks like armoured cockpits, armoured systems. And you can gain some extra slots by putting in a few floors, hoping that in many cases these floors only really come up when someone's rolling on the critical hit chart anyway. So, well, I'll make something that, in the criticals is a little bit vulnerable, but as an actual performer, it's out there. It's your choices, and I always find that sort of stuff is fun because, of course, everyone comes up with their invincible vehicle, which immediately tends to blow up. Sidebar: I was playing this with my friend Damien back in the day, and I had designed my super ultra hyper fighter, which I adored, and this thing just blew up like 5 minutes into its first scenario, and it did this consistently. And it was like he did a hit and would just ass out and roll maximum dice, which was exactly enough to get past my armor, enough to get it to the first critical hit roll. And in each of those critical hit rolls, I would basically roll the 12, which was sort of a reactor explosion, and the thing would go up. It's like, what? Basically, so someone's having to roll 2d6 and get a 12, and then I'm having to roll 2d6 and get a 12. But this was just happening time and time and time again. And so yes, this just became the the Widowmaker class fighter. What? Yep, no one will go in one. What? Look, guys, I've designed this. Look, statistically, you are safe as houses in this thing. I'm not going in it. What? Look, just get in it. You get in it. What? If it's so safe, you get in it. Oh, well, I can't get in that. I'm the designer. Like, all right, well, then we're not getting in it. Yeah, fun times. But so what does a game bring to the table? It is a simple, easy to play, easy to learn, fun game of space pew pew. That late 90s period of sci-fi kind of board game design was coming up with some really great ideas, and this was one of them. It gives you a game where it's easy to run your ships, so you can have a bunch of them on the table, and you can rage them out and do formations and have some fun. There is a huge number of pre-done ships in the rules and so on, and they have different kind of national flavors and characteristics if you're following their setting, so that these things have you can really tell which races have which kind of design theories and so on, so you can buy into that universe or not. But what it really boils down to is simple maneuver system, but you have to think about it. Firing the torpedoes, the ordnance is actually a big thing in this. Firing torpedoes and then diving around, shaking them off is a thing, and having decoys and so on to throw these things off is also a thing. So making sure that you design ships that have the ability to defend against this stuff is important. So it doesn't have that kind of a World War II in space that so many space fighter games have. For some reason, we forgot how to make missiles in the future. No, you're firing missiles and I got tone. Yes, you have to do all that. So it does have that kind of feel to it. And that damage track system is simple but colourful. So easy to manage again. And when you get to those random rolls, it takes the damage away from just being a plod of whittling away someone's abilities, and the weird stuff starts happening. Suddenly this thing can't turn in one direction. Suddenly this thing can't lock on for the next couple of turns. Suddenly this thing's, suddenly the gunner's injured, the pilot's got to go in on his own, etc. So yeah, a great little game. It's well worth playing. There's a ton of universe material for this, so there are campaigns and there are scenarios and there are adventures and so on. So like if you get into the game, yeah, there is a ton of stuff for it, which I think, say again, if we're comparing it to Interceptor, which is still my preferred game, I think that's where this one won over Interceptor, because they provided an atomic buttload of resources. Whereas the phaser game, kind of didn't quite manage to get that far, which is a shame. However, great to see that it's still going, and this is well worth playing. As far as kind of surviving space fighter games, this one's kind of it, because there was a slew of other ones like Moondogs and all sorts of stuff, but this is the only one that really is kind of officially still in print. And it's officially still in print because of those strengths. It's a good game, it's easy to learn, it's easy to play, but it gives you a riotously good time and you come back for more. Can't say better. You play a game, you have some laughs, and it makes you want to play it yet another time. So anyway, do take a look. It's Mr. Snoots recommended. There's also Fancy Frog recommended. Mostly because he's green, I think. But find it. It's up on, I think it's up on Drive-Thru. Links down below. Anyway, this is more of my obsession for miniatures and so on, because, of course, painting up little spaceships is fun. Give it a whirl. We will see you around a gaming table sometime. If not at a con, what the hell? Maybe around the local club sometime. Look after yourselves until we meet. And bye from us, and see you again soon. Bye.